Ashamed of his wife, a man decides to bring his mistress to an important meeting. She was humiliated, but what no one expected was that the future would surprise them all. Click subscribe to discover more exciting stories like this and avoid 10 years of bad luck in love. The morning sun filtered through the silk curtains, softly illuminating the master bedroom of the Anderson mansion. Sarah, a 35-year-old woman with natural beauty and eyes that reflected a mixture of love and concern, watched her husband Michael as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. "Are you sure you can't cancel that business trip, honey?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's been so long since we spent time together." Michael, a tall and handsome 40-year-old man, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that screamed success, didn't even turn to look at her. "Sarah, we've talked about this contract could change our lives. I can't afford to lose it." Sarah sighed, approaching him and placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know, it's just the kids. Miss you. I miss you." For a moment, Michael seemed to soften. He turned to her, their eyes meeting briefly before he looked away. "I'll be back soon, I promise." With a quick kiss on the cheek, Michael grabbed his suitcase and left the room, leaving Sarah with a feeling of emptiness in her chest. As Michael got into his luxury car, his phone vibrated. A text message lit up the screen. "See you tonight? I can't wait. Jessica." A smile spread across his face as he replied, "Of course I can't wait either." Meanwhile, in the mansion, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on a photograph from their wedding. Where had that love, that complicity, gone? With determination in her gaze, she stood up and headed to Michael's study. If he wouldn't give her answers, she'd find them herself. Hours later, in a luxurious restaurant in downtown New York, Michael was dining with Jessica, a stunning 28-year-old woman with pronounced curves and a laugh that turned heads of everyone present. "Are you sure your wife doesn't suspect anything?" Jessica asked, leaning forward, her cleavage catching Michael's attention. He smiled arrogantly. "Sarah is too naive. Besides, she's too busy with the kids and her charity work to notice anything." What Michael didn't know was that at that very moment, Sarah was in his study, tears in her eyes, holding a stack of hotel and restaurant bills, along with printed text messages that left no doubt about her husband's infidelity. With trembling hands, Sarah picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Mom, I need you to come watch the kids. There's something I have to..." Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Michael raised his glass. "To us, darling, and to the bright future that awaits us." Jessica smiled, clinking her glass with his "to us." Neither of them noticed the figure watching them from the sidewalk, with a broken heart but a fierce determination in her eyes. Sarah clenched her fists, her mind working at full speed. This wouldn't be just any night. It would be the night when everything changed. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. Each night when the children were asleep, she locked herself in her room and cried silently, muffling her sobs in the pillow. But with every tear shed, a new determination grew within her. One afternoon, while checking the mail, she found an invitation that would change everything. It was for the annual gala of Michael's company, a crucial event where important contracts would be closed. Sarah remembered how in previous years she had accompanied her husband, proud to be by his side this year. He hadn't even mentioned it to her. With the invitation in hand, an idea began to form in her mind. If Michael wanted to shame her, she would teach him a lesson he would never forget. The next day, Sarah headed to the most exclusive mall in the city. For hours, she browsed high-end boutiques, trying on dresses she would never have dared to wear before. Finally, she found the perfect one. A scarlet red dress that hugged every curve of her body, with a neckline that left you breathless and a slit that revealed her toned legs. "It's perfect," she murmured to herself, admiring her reflection in the mirror. Michael won't know what hit him. Meanwhile, at the office, Michael was discussing the final details of the gala with his secretary. "Make sure Jessica is on the guest list," he ordered, not noticing the look of disapproval from his assistant. "I'll introduce her as my personal advisor." "Mr. Anderson," the secretary began cautiously, "are you sure that's a good idea?" "Your wife," Michael interrupted her with a brusque gesture. My wife isn't coming, she never comes to these events, now do as I say. The days passed quickly. The night of the gala arrived, and Michael was getting ready in his room, adjusting his tuxedo in front of the mirror. You look very handsome, Sarah said from the doorway, surprising Michael. He turned, a mixture of surprise and annoyance on his face. Sarah, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be with the kids. Oh, my mother offered to watch them, she replied with an enigmatic smile. I thought I'd surprise you and accompany you to the gala. It's been so long since we went out together. Michael visibly paled. I don't think that's a good idea. These events are boring and— Nonsense, Sarah interrupted him, approaching and fixing his bow tie. I'll be ready in half an hour. I'll wait for you in the car. Before Michael could protest, Sarah left the room, leaving him in a state of panic. Quickly, he took out his phone and dialed a number. Jessica, we have a problem, he whispered urgently. Sarah insists on coming to the gala. I need you to cancel— Cancel? Jessica's voice sounded indignant on the other end of the line. Michael, I've been waiting months for this opportunity. I'm not going to cancel just because your wife decided to play the perfect wife deal with her. The call cut off, leaving Michael in an impossible dilemma. On one hand, his mistress demanding his presence. On the other, his wife insisting on accompanying him. What he didn't know was that both women had plans that would change the course of the night and their lives forever. While Michael was dealing with his internal crisis, Sarah was getting ready in the master bathroom. She applied flawless makeup, highlighting her eyes with smoky shadows and painting her lips an intense red that matched her dress. She put on stiletto heels that made her look even taller and more elegant. Looking at herself in the mirror one last time, Sarah took a deep breath. It's time, she told herself. It's time for Michael to see exactly what he's been ignoring all these years. With one last look of determination, Sarah left the bathroom, ready to face the night that would change her life forever. The ballroom of the Pinnacle Hotel sparkled with golden lights and gleaming crystals. The city's business elite gathered, champagne flutes in hand and rehearsed smiles on their faces. In the midst of all this, Michael Anderson made his entrance with Sarah on his arm. The whispers didn't take long to start. Sarah, usually discreet and modest, was now the center of all gazes with her stunning red dress. Michael, visibly uncomfortable, forced a smile as he greeted his colleagues. Michael, what a pleasant surprise, exclaimed Robert Thompson, one of the main partners. Sarah, you look dazzling tonight. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with a confidence that Michael had never seen before. Thank you, Robert. I decided it was time to come out of my shell. As Sarah chatted animatedly with the guests, Michael couldn't help but nervously glance towards the entrance. At any moment, Jessica would arrive, and he had no idea how he would handle the situation. As if his thoughts had summoned her, Jessica made her entrance, dressed in a tight black dress that left little to the imagination. She headed straight for where Michael was standing. Michael, darling, Jessica purred, completely ignoring Sarah's presence. Aren't you going to introduce me to your colleagues? Michael's face visibly paled. Jessica, I didn't expect to see you here so soon. Sarah, who until that moment had been chatting with another group, turned slowly. Her eyes met Jessica's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. And who is this charming young lady, Michael? Sarah asked, her voice calm but with an edge that could cut diamonds. Michael, caught between the two women, began to sweat. Sarah, this is Jessica. She's a company advisor. Jessica, without losing her composure, extended her hand to Sarah. A pleasure to finally meet you. Michael talks about you a lot. Sarah took Jessica's hand, squeezing it perhaps a bit harder than necessary. How curious he's never mentioned you. The tension in the air was palpable. Nearby guests began to notice that something wasn't right, and soon small groups formed, whispering and observing the scene unfolding. Michael, desperate to control the situation, tried to pull Sarah away. Darling, why don't we go say hello to the Millers? We haven't seen them in a while. But Sarah didn't move. Instead, her gaze was fixed on Jessica. Tell me, Jessica, in what specific area do you advise my husband? It must be something very important for him to invite you to such an exclusive event. Jessica, unfazed, responded with a malicious smile. "Oh, I advise Michael in many areas, some more intimate than others." The silence that followed that statement was deafening. Nearby guests stopped pretending they weren't listening, and now openly watched, waiting to see how the drama would unfold. Sarah, too. Everyone's surprise, including Jessica's, let out a laugh. "Intimate? Darling, if you knew how little intimate Michael has been lately, you'd realize that your advice isn't bearing fruit." Michael, mortified, tried to intervene. "Sarah, please, this isn't the place or the time." "Isn't it?" Sarah interrupted him, her voice rising. "Then when, Michael? When were you going to tell me that you've been cheating on me? When were you going to have the decency to be honest with me?" The murmurs in the room intensified. Jessica, seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, tried to back away, but Sarah stopped her with a look. "Oh no, dear. You stay after all. You're an integral part of this story, aren't you?" With each of Sarah's words, Michael's carefully constructed world began to crumble. His colleagues looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. His reputation, so important to him, was being shattered before his eyes. But Sarah wasn't finished. With a calmness that contrasted with the storm in her eyes, she addressed everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this lovely evening, but I think it's important that you all know the kind of man Michael Anderson is. A man who not only cheats on his wife, but has the audacity to bring his mistress to an event like this." The silence in the room was sepulchral. All eyes were fixed on Sarah, Michael, and Jessica. "So," Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly, "if any of you are considering doing business with him, I suggest you think twice. Because if he's capable of betraying his family like this, what makes you think he won't betray you?" With those words, Sarah took off her wedding ring and dropped it into Michael's champagne glass. "Consider yourself free, Michael. I hope you and your advisor are very happy together." And with that, Sarah turned and walked towards the exit, leaving behind a room in complete chaos. Michael, paralyzed by shame and surprise, could only watch as his wife, and with her his life as he knew it, disappeared through the doors of the Pinnacle Hotel. The weeks following the gala were a whirlwind of emotions and changes for everyone involved. Sarah, after her dramatic exit from the Pinnacle Hotel, took refuge in her mother's house, Emily, a strong and protective woman who didn't hesitate to welcome her daughter and grandchildren in this moment of crisis. "Mom, how could I have been so blind?" Sarah sobbed one night, sitting in the kitchen of her childhood home. Emily, with the wisdom that only years can give, took her daughter's hands in hers. "My dear, love sometimes blinds us, but you've shown a strength. You didn't even know you had. I'm proud of you." Meanwhile, in the Anderson mansion, Michael was living his own hell. The consequences of that night didn't take long to materialize. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from partners and clients who, one after another, were canceling contracts and withdrawing investments. "You can't do this to me," Michael shouted into the phone. "We've worked together for years." But the answer was always the same. "I'm sorry, Michael, but we can't risk our reputation by associating with you after what happened." Jessica, for her part, had completely disappeared. After the scandal at the gala, she vanished without a trace, leaving Michael alone to face the consequences of his actions. One afternoon, as Sarah was sorting through some of her belongings at her mother's house, she found an old box full of memories from her youth. Among photographs and letters, a name jumped out at her memory: Ethan Carter. "Ethan," she murmured, caressing an old photograph where they appeared together, smiling, and carefree Emily, who was passing by, stopped when she heard the name. "Ethan, the Carter boy? We haven't heard from him in years." Sarah nodded, lost in her memories. "We were so close, I wonder what became of his life." What Sarah didn't know was that at that very moment, thousands of miles away, Ethan Carter, now a successful entrepreneur, was reading the news of the Anderson scandal in an international newspaper. "Sarah." Ethan whispered, his eyes fixed on the photograph accompanying the article. Sarah's face, captured as she was leaving the Pinnacle Hotel, showed a mixture of pain and determination that touched something deep in Ethan's heart. Without thinking twice, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Prepare the jet, I'm coming home." Back in the city, Michael struggled to keep afloat what was left of his business, Empire One afternoon. While desperately reviewing documents in his study, he received an unexpected visit. "Mr. Anderson," announced his housekeeper, "Miss Jessica is here." Michael looked up, surprised. Jessica entered, but she wasn't the same confident and seductive woman as before. She seemed nervous, almost scared. "Michael, we need to talk," Jessica began, her voice trembling slightly. "Now you want to talk?" Michael spat, the bitterness evident in his voice. "After disappearing and leaving me alone in the middle of this chaos?" Jessica took a deep breath. "There's something you need to know, something that will change everything." As Jessica revealed her secret, elsewhere in the city, Sarah was making a decision that would change the course of her life. Sitting in her mother's living room with her children playing in the garden, she opened her laptop and began to write. "It's time to reclaim my dreams," she told herself as she typed the title of her new project. Rising from the Ashes, a guide for women in search of their true self. What Sarah didn't know was that this small act of courage would be the first step towards a future she could never have imagined. A future that would lead her to rediscover not only her inner strength, but also a love from the past that she had never completely forgotten. As the sun set over the city, 3 lives were at a crossroads. Michael, facing a revelation that would shake the foundations of his world. Sarah, taking the first steps towards her personal and professional rebirth. And Ethan, flying back to the city, driven by a heart impulse he had ignored for years. Fate had set in motion a series of events that would intertwine their lives in ways none of them could have foreseen. And in the midst of all this, a question hung in the air. What secret was Jessica keeping? And how would this secret change the course of their lives forever? Michael Anderson's study had become an emotional battlefield. Jessica, with tears in her eyes, finally revealed the secret she had been keeping. "I'm pregnant, Michael," she blurted out, her voice barely a whisper. "And the baby is yours." Michael collapsed into his chair, the color draining from his face. "Pregnant? But how? We were always careful." Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "Apparently, not careful enough. I'm 3 months along." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael, with his head in his hands, felt like his world was crumbling even further. Not only had he lost his wife and his reputation, but now he faced a responsibility he had never anticipated. "What are we going to do?" he finally asked, his voice broken. Jessica looked at him, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "I don't know, Michael. But I can't do this alone. I don't want to do this alone." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Sarah was immersed in her project. Her book, Rising from the Ashes, had started as a form of personal therapy, but was quickly becoming something bigger. One afternoon, while working on her laptop in a local coffee shop, a familiar voice pulled her out of her concentration. "Sarah? Sarah Anderson?" She looked up, and her heart skipped a beat. Standing in front of her was Ethan Carter, as handsome as she remembered, but with an air of maturity that the years had given him. "Ethan," she exclaimed, standing up. "I can't believe it. What are you doing? Here?" Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite decipher. "I came back to the city for business, but the truth is, I was hoping to find you." They sat down together, and the hours flew by as they caught up. Sarah told him about her failed marriage and her new project, while Ethan shared stories of his years abroad and his success in business. "I always knew you'd achieve great things," Sarah said, a note of pride in her voice. Ethan looked at her intently. "Sarah, there's something I need to confess. The truth is, I never forgot you all these years. A part of me always wondered, what if?" Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Memories of her youth, of the feelings she once had for Ethan, began to surface. "Ethan," she began, but was interrupted by the sound of her phone. It was a message from her lawyer. Michael had requested an urgent meeting to discuss the divorce. Reality hit her again. Despite the feelings Ethan was awakening in her, she was still technically married, and she had 2 children to consider. "I'm sorry, Ethan, I have to go," she said, quickly gathering her things. "But I'd like us to stay in touch." Ethan nodded, a mixture of hope and resignation on his face. "Of course I'll be here as long as necessary." As Sarah headed to her lawyer's office, she couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Just when she was beginning to glimpse a new future, the past was catching up with her. At the lawyer's office, Sarah found herself face to face with Michael for the first time since the night of the gala. The man in front of her seemed a shadow of the powerful businessman he once was, haggard, disheveled, and visibly nervous. Michael could barely look her in the eye. "Sarah," he began, his voice barely audible, "before we start with the divorce terms, there's something you need to know." Sarah's heart raced. What else could there be? What other surprise did fate have in store for her? "Jessica is pregnant," Michael blurted out, the words falling like stones in the silence of the office. "And the baby is mine." Sarah felt as if the ground was opening up beneath her feet. All the emotions she had managed to control in recent weeks, anger, pain, betrayal, came back with renewed force. "How could you?" she whispered, tears of rage forming in her eyes. "You not only destroyed our family, but you created another one in the process." Michael tried to take her hand, but Sarah withdrew it as if his touch burned. "Sarah, please, I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but I need your help. I don't know what to do." For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel pity for the man in front of her. But then she remembered all the nights she spent alone, all the times he prioritized his work over his family, all the lies and deceptions. She stood up, straightening herself with a dignity that surprised even her lawyer. "What you do with your life and with Jessica is no longer my problem, Michael. I'm here to finalize our marriage and ensure the well-being of our children. Nothing more." As she left the office, leaving a shattered Michael behind her, Sarah felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt she had control over her destiny. Her phone vibrated with a message. It was Ethan. "Dinner tonight. I know a quiet place where we could talk." Sarah looked at the message, a small smile forming on her lips. Perhaps after all, the universe had different plans for her, plans that included not only rediscovering her inner strength, but also giving herself a second chance at love. As the sun set over the city, 3 lives continued to intertwine in a dance of destiny and choice. Michael, facing the consequences of his actions and the responsibility of a new life. Sarah, standing on the threshold of a new chapter with the past behind her and an uncertain but promising future ahead. And Ethan, waiting patiently, ready to offer the support and love that Sarah so deserved. The night promised to be the beginning of something new, something unexpected, and in Sarah's heart, a spark of hope began to burn, illuminating the path to a tomorrow full of possibilities. The restaurant Ethan had chosen was a small oasis of tranquility in the midst of the bustling city. Sarah arrived punctually, her heart beating with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Ethan was waiting for her at a discreet table, illuminated by the soft candlelight. When he saw her, he stood up, his eyes shining with contained emotion. "Sarah," he said softly, taking her hand and gently kissing it. "You look beautiful." Sarah blushed, suddenly feeling like a teenager again. "Thank you, Ethan. This place is charming." As they dined, the conversation flowed naturally, as if the years of separation had never existed. Sarah told him about the meeting with Michael and the news of Jessica's pregnancy. Ethan listened attentively, his face a mixture of concern and compassion. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you." Sarah sighed, absent-mindedly playing with her wineglass. "The strange thing is, it doesn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It's as if I can finally see clearly who Michael is and who I am without him." Ethan smiled, his eyes fixed on her. "You were always the strongest of the two, you know. Even when we were young, I admired your determination, your ability to face any challenge." Sarah felt a warmth spread in her chest at his words. "Ethan, there's something I need to ask you. Why did you never say anything? About your feelings, I mean." Ethan took a sip of his wine, as if gathering courage. "I was afraid. Sarah. Afraid of ruining our friendship. afraid of not being enough for you. And when I finally gathered the courage to tell you, you met Michael. And well, the rest is history." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions and lost opportunities. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "And now? What do you want now, Ethan?" Ethan reached out, taking Sarah's hand in his. "Now, I want a second chance. I want to be with you, Sarah, to support you in this new chapter of your life, to be a part of it if you'll let me." Tears glistened in Sarah's eyes, but this time they were tears of hope, of possibilities. "Ethan, Her response was interrupted by the shrill sound of her phone. It was her mother, Emily. "Sarah, honey, you need to come home right now." Emily's voice sounded urgent. "Michael is here. He's not well. I think he's been drinking." Sarah's heart sank. Just when she thought she could leave the past behind, it came back to claim her. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said, standing up hurriedly. "I have to go. It's a family emergency." Ethan nodded, concern evident on his face. "Of course. Do you want me to come with you?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then shook her head. "No, this is something I have to handle alone. But thank you, Ethan, for everything." As Sarah rushed to her mother's house, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. What did Michael want? And how would this affect her budding relationship with Ethan? When she arrived at the house, she found Michael sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. Emily was standing at the door, her face a mask of disapproval. "Michael," Sarah said, approaching cautiously. "What are you doing here?" Michael looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "Sarah, please, I need to talk to you. I can't do this alone." Sarah looked at her mother, who nodded resignedly and went back inside the house, leaving them alone. "Do what, Michael?" Sarah asked, sitting down beside him but maintaining a prudent distance. "Everything," he replied, his voice broken. "The baby, the company, life without you, Sarah. I made the worst mistake of my life by cheating on you. I've lost everything, and now, Jessica says she wants to move abroad with the baby. She says she can't stand the scandal here." Sarah felt a pang of compassion but remained firm. "Michael, I'm sorry, but I can't help you with this. Your decisions have led you to this point, and now you must face the consequences." Michael looked at her, desperation in his eyes. I know, but our children, Sarah. What will we tell them? How do we explain that they'll have a half-sibling on the other side of the world?" Sarah took a deep breath, seeking the inner strength she had discovered in recent weeks. "We'll tell them the truth, Michael. That sometimes adults make mistakes, but that doesn't change the love we feel for them, and that sometimes families come in different forms." Michael nodded slowly, as if he was processing her words. "You're amazing, you know. Even now, after everything I've done, you're still the voice of reason." Sarah stood up, feeling it was time to end this conversation. "Michael, I'll always be the mother of your children, and because of that there will always be a bond between us, but our marriage is over. It's time for both of us to move on." As Michael walked away, defeated but perhaps a little clearer about his path forward, Sarah felt as if a chapter in her life was finally closing. She took out her phone and, after a moment of hesitation, wrote a message to Ethan. "I'm sorry for leaving like that. Can we meet tomorrow? I think we have a pending conversation." The response came almost instantly. "Of course, I'll be waiting." As she entered the house, where her mother was waiting for her with a cup of tea and a comforting hug, Sarah felt that, for the first time in a long time, the future was opening up before her, full of possibilities. The road wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it, stronger and wiser than ever. In another part of the city, Jessica looked out the window of her apartment, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Her suitcases were packed, the plane tickets on the table. Tomorrow she would begin a new life, far from the scandal and accusing glances. But as she observed the city lights, she couldn't help but wonder if she was making the right decision. And so, as night fell over the city, three souls found themselves at crossroads, their destinies intertwined in ways they never could have imagined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and perhaps new opportunities for love and redemption. The morning arrived with a clarity that seemed to mock the emotional confusion reigning in the lives of our protagonists. Sarah woke up early, her mind already working on the events of the previous day and the pending conversation with Ethan. As she prepared breakfast for her children, her phone vibrated with a message. It was Ethan. "Good morning, Sarah. I hope you were able to rest. Shall we meet at the park at 11? There's a quiet spot near the lake where we can talk." Sarah smiled, feeling a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. She responded affirmatively and set about facing the day with renewed energy. Meanwhile, in his luxurious but now lonely apartment, Michael woke up with a pounding headache, a reminder of his night of excess. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. "It's time for both of us to move on." With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he had been avoiding. "Jessica, it's me. We need to talk before you leave." On the other side of the city, Jessica was closing her last suitcase. Michael's call took her by surprise, but she decided she owed him at least one last conversation. "Okay, Michael, let's meet in an hour at the coffee shop in the mall." At 11 o'clock sharp, Sarah arrived at the park. Ethan was already waiting for her, with 2 takeaway coffees in hand. They walked in silence until they reached a bench overlooking the lake, the sun's rays dancing on the water. "Sarah," Ethan began, his voice soft but determined, "we couldn't finish our conversation last night, but I want you to know that what I said is true. I want to be with you, support you, be part of your life and your children's lives. If you'll let me—" Sarah looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Ethan, these last few months have been an emotional roller coaster. Part of me wants to jump into this with you to make up for lost time, but another part is afraid. Afraid to trust, to get hurt again." Ethan took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I understand, Sarah. And I'm not asking you to make a decision right now, I'm just asking for a chance. Allow me to show you that what I feel is real, that I'm here to stay." Sarah felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "Okay," she finally said, "let's take it step by step, all right?" Ethan smiled, visible relief on his face. Step by step sounds perfect. Meanwhile, at the mall's coffee shop, Michael and Jessica were facing each other in a tense conversation. "You can't take my child to the other side of the world," Michael said, his voice a mixture of pleading and anger. Jessica looked at him with a mixture of pity and determination. "And what do you propose, Michael? That I stay here where everyone points at me as the other woman, the home wrecker? This baby deserves a fresh start, away from all this scandal." Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I could go with you. We could try to be a family." Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "A family? Michael, you don't love me. You never did. You're just scared of losing everything." Jessica's words hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. It was the truth he had been avoiding facing. "You're right," he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't love you, but this baby, it's my child. I can't just let it go." Jessica looked at him, her expression softening a bit. "I'm not asking you to let it go, Michael. I'm asking you to let us go for now, to give us the chance to start over. You can be part of the baby's life, but from a distance, at least for a while." Michael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his past decisions. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, but promise me you'll keep me informed, that you'll let me be part of their life, even if it's from afar." "I promise," Jessica said, a hint of a smile on her lips. Meanwhile, Sarah and Ethan had left the park and were walking through the city streets, rediscovering together places they had frequented in their youth. "Remember that ice cream shop?" Ethan asked, pointing to a small store on the corner. "We used to come here after class." Sarah smiled, memories flooding her mind. "How could I forget? You always ordered the same flavor, chocolate with almonds." "And you always teased me for being so predictable," Ethan laughed. They looked at each other, nostalgia, and something more shining in their eyes. Without thinking, Sarah stood on her tiptoes and softly kissed Ethan. It was a brief kiss, almost shy but loaded with promises. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, blushing. Ethan interrupted her with another kiss, this one longer, deeper. When they separated, they were both breathless. "Don't apologize," Ethan whispered. "I've been waiting years for this." The moment was interrupted by the sound of Sarah's phone. It was a message from her lawyer. The divorce papers were ready to be signed. Sarah looked at Ethan, a mixture of emotions on her face. "I have to go sign the divorce papers." Ethan nodded, understanding. "Do you want me to come with you?" Sarah thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I think this is something I need to do alone, but can we see each other afterwards?" "Of course," Ethan said, kissing her forehead. "I'll be waiting." As Sarah headed to her lawyer's office, she felt as if she were closing a chapter in her life and opening another at the same time. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time she felt hopeful. At the airport, Jessica was preparing to board her flight. She looked one last time at the city she was leaving behind, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "It's time for a new beginning," she whispered to herself. And so, as the sun began to set, our protagonists found themselves at different crossroads, each facing the consequences of their decisions and looking towards an uncertain but possibility-filled future. Sarah, about to sign the papers that would officially end her marriage, but with her heart full of hope for a new love. Michael, alone in his apartment, facing the reality of his actions and the challenge of rebuilding his life from scratch. Jessica, on board a plane, carrying with her not only her future child, but also the secrets and regrets of the past. And Ethan, waiting patiently, ready to offer Sarah the love and support he had always wanted to give her. Fate had intertwined their lives in unexpected ways. And now, each of them faced the task of forging their own path, aware that every decision, every action would have consequences that would resonate in the future. Time, that relentless agent of change, had passed inexorably. A year had gone by since that fateful night at the gala, a year full of tears, laughter, disappointments, and new beginnings. Sarah found herself on the terrace of her new apartment, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the sunrise painting, the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her book, Rising from the Ashes, had become an unexpected success, resonating with thousands of women who identified with her story of overcoming and personal rediscovery. The sound of soft footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Ethan appeared beside her, wrapping his arms around her waist and softly kissing her neck. "Good morning, love," he whispered. "Ready for the big day?" Sarah smiled, turning to look him in the eyes, more than ready, nervous but excited. Today was the day of the inauguration of her foundation, a project she had worked tirelessly on for months. The Phoenix Foundation would be dedicated to helping women who, like her, needed support to rebuild their lives after toxic relationships or difficult situations. As they prepared for the event, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the path that had led her here. Her relationship with Ethan had blossomed slowly, with patience and mutual understanding. He had been her rock, her unwavering support, winning not only her heart, but also the affection of her children. On the other side of the city, Michael was adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. The past year had been an emotional roller coaster and full of challenges. After hitting rock bottom, he had found the strength to face his demons, therapy, and genuinely admired the path she had taken. At the event hall, guests began to arrive. Sarah, radiant in an elegant blue dress, greeted each one with a warm smile. Ethan was by her side, his silent but constant presence a reminder of everything they had built together. When Michael entered, there was a moment of tension in the air, but Sarah, with a maturity that surprised even herself, approached to greet him. "I'm glad you could come," she said, her voice sincere. Michael nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. What you're doing is admirable, Sarah." For a moment, both remembered everything they had lived through together, the good times, the bad, the joys and the betrayals. But instead of bitterness, there was now only a quiet acceptance that that chapter of their lives had ended. The inauguration ceremony was emotional. Sarah gave a powerful speech about the importance of self-esteem, the value of getting up after falling, and the strength found in supporting each other. As she spoke, her eyes met, Ethan's in the audience, and she felt a wave of gratitude for having him in her life. Amidst the applause and congratulations, Sarah took a moment to look around. She saw her children proud and happy. She saw her mother, Emily, with tears of joy in her eyes. She saw Ethan, her reborn love, looking at her with adoration, and she even saw Michael sincerely applauding, a man changed by circumstances but on the path to redemption. After the event, as the last guests were saying goodbye, Ethan approached Sarah with a mysterious smile. "I have a surprise for you," he said, guiding her towards the hall's terrace. Under the starry sky, Ethan knelt before her, taking out a small velvet box from his pocket. "Sarah," he began, his voice trembling, slightly with emotion, "years ago I let the opportunity to tell you how I felt pass by. I've spent every day since then regretting that silence. But fate has given us a second chance, and I don't intend to waste it. I love you, Sarah. I love you with every fiber of my being. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of marrying me?" Tears were flowing freely down Sarah's cheeks as she nodded, unable to form words. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, before standing up and kissing her passionately as they embraced under the stars. Sarah thought about the long and difficult road that had led her to this moment. Every tear shed, every obstacle overcome, every decision made, all had contributed to forging the woman she was now. Somewhere in the world, Jessica was, cradling her son to sleep, finding in motherhood a peace and purpose she had never known before. In his office, Michael worked late, determined to build something meaningful, something his son could be proud of someday. And here, on this terrace, Sarah found herself in the arms of the man who had always been destined to be her life partner, looking towards a future full of promises and possibilities. Life, with all its complications and unexpected turns, had taught them all a valuable lesson, that even in the darkest moments there is always hope, that love in all its forms has the power to heal and transform, and that in the end, our decisions and the strength to face their consequences are what truly defines who we are. As Sarah and Ethan returned to the party, ready to share their happiness with their loved ones, the night sky seemed to shine with a silent promise of better days to come. And at that moment, surrounded by love and new possibilities, Sarah knew that no matter what the future held for her, she was ready to face it. Because she had risen from the ashes, stronger and wiser, ready to write the next chapter of her life with hope, love, and the unbreakable determination that had always been her greatest strength.